Is it recording on your end? It's recording on mine.
Yep.
We are good. All right. Well, let's just get started. My name is Ryan. I'm here with Sydney today. She is joining me on this episode of the podcast, and we are just going to dive in. Welcome, Sydney. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we just get started about kind of, you know, a little bit about yourself, your background, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect. I'm Sydney. I'm a pre-licensed marriage and family therapist, and I actually just graduated from the same program that Ryan was in. That's how I met her. I graduated just in May. So right now I'm out in the field kind of as a new therapist, navigating and finding what, populations I'm really interested in working with. I'm working at the same place I did my internship at. So I work in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis area, working with, oh gosh, all different populations. I work with kiddos, I work, with adolescents and teens, I work with adults, older adults, families, and couples. I've recently found I'm really interested in continuing my work with kids and families specifically, but yeah, kind of all over the place right now and just trying to get as much experience as I can. And it's been super awesome to have Ryan as a colleague and a friend, just navigating the same world together. So I'm really excited to be on here today.
Yeah, thank you again for being here. And it is so crazy to think that we
Mhm.
met in through the St. Thomas program getting our masters, and we're kind of thriving, I guess, out in the world,
Yep.
like as therapists. And I feel like we're thriving. We are figuring it out and we are doing well.
Hmm.
And that's partly there's a
Yep,
huge demand for mental health services. Um,
definitely.
but also I feel fortunate that we both kind of have similar interests and should like trajectory for our professional work.
Mhm.
Um, so
Well,
I'm
yeah, that's how
curious.
we kind of connected because, we connected because we went to the same yoga studio and we were in the same master's program. And now we're like both here doing our work together with kids and the families and also teaching kids yoga. That's also something we're doing if you're interested in, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious how you landed up in a master's program for therapy. Why are you a therapist?
Yeah, that's the question. For the longest time, I don't really think I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think for the longest time, I did want to be in a helping for profession, and I think when you're in high school, you think, okay, that's a nurse or a doctor. Like, I just wasn't super aware of all of the helping professions out there, especially like, you know, not being super familiar with the mental health field until I started therapy myself. So I was going for my degree in biology for the longest time in undergrad and just didn't feel super connected to it. I remember in high school, I loved psychology courses. I loved learning about brain and development and how your brain impacts your body and everything. I just thought that was so interesting. So I actually switched my major to psychology. And during that time, I still was like, I don't know what I want to do with a psychology degree. I was going through some personal stuff at the time. This is probably when I was 18, 19 years old. And that's the first time I started therapy. So I think it was just like always something that was slowly building and slowly becoming something that would be a huge part of my life. And it wasn't until I started my own therapy that I was like, wow, I've seen such a huge transformation in my life. I've seen how therapy has impacted me. I want to be this person for other people. So that's how I didn't really figure that out until sophomore and junior year of college. And I think you have a lot of pressure when you're 18 to like, okay, figure it out. You're in college. And I switched my mind so many times. And then when I landed on therapy, towards the end of college, I like never wavered. So I applied to a graduate program. I'm from North Dakota, so I moved here, went through the program, graduated, and yeah, it's kind of how I ended up here.
And you stayed.
And I stayed. I love the community. I've created such a community from school and now in my work and in like a local yoga studio. So it's an area I really love. I love being in and I love my clients more than anything.
How do you think your own therapy has kind of like assisted or changed your journey to becoming a therapist?
Yeah, I think it's changed it in a lot of ways. I think it's really opened my mind to how much our emotions impact every part of our life. And when you don't express your emotions or you're not able to in a healthy, safe space, um, it can really affect you long term. And I think, as an adult, it's why I'm so interested in working with children in early intervention because as a child, there's a lot of things that I don't work through. And a lot of it resurfaced when I was an adult. And I know if I would have worked through that, when I was younger, it probably wouldn't affect me so much. So when I was finally an adult, able to kind of make that choice for myself, like, okay, we're going to start therapy and kind of figure out and work through these like dysfunctional patterns you've been so used to in your life. Um, it just, I mean, it's life changing. And I think that, it can sound cliche, but it is. So that's just how therapy has impacted me in such huge ways, and I think that's what drives me to make such a difference in the lives of my clients too. I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that some of that, like, had you not started your own therapy, your practice as a therapist would look wildly different?
Completely different, yeah, and I'm very, encouraging of, like, everyone to go to therapy, especially if you're a therapist. Your own work in therapy is so important. And if I didn't do that work, I think me showing in a therapeutic space as a clinician would be entirely different. Because I think I had to work through a lot of my own things and that I have answers. I think people might, have this preconceived notion that therapists have all the answers and they don't need their own therapy. And that's not true. Like, we still need that support and just assistance because we are carrying a lot of like other people's stories. Um, so yeah, I think it'd be a lot significantly different.
I can agree with that too. And I think that
Yeah.
as also someone who works with children, like I find myself sometimes being a little set off or upset by their experience. And
Mhm.
like I don't I don't love the word triggered. I feel like it's really overused. So I'm and maybe not
Mhm.
always used in the right context. But sometimes
Yep.
their childhood experience reminds me of my own, and I don't think I could effectively help them process that if I didn't do it on my own.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and not that it doesn't still affect us, like, because you can empathize with what they're going through, but being able to come from a place of I really empathize with you, but instead of letting this affect me and affect our work together, I'm gonna kind of in a way allow it to like empower this space that we're in because in a way I've been it's not an exactly similar situation, but had those experiences and showing up in a way of I'm here to help you um is huge because you've gone through it and you are aware of the tools on how to get through it.
Is there a part of you that's like shares some of your childhood experiences and like your own experiences with clients?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
what has that experience
I
been like?
Yeah, that makes me smile because I also think that I wouldn't say it's controversial necessarily. I think that's a really strong word in like just the mental health field, but I think personal disclosure can be really powerful. Sharing like your own experiences and not taking away from that client's like lived real life experiences, but I've shared things that I know will help the client feel less alone. And I think, for example, I just started working with a client and she's really hesitant to start therapy. This is her first time in therapy. And all I said, like she was super quiet the first session, second session, really didn't want to open up. And all I said was, I know how scary starting therapy can be because I've been there. Yeah. All I said was, I know that it's really scary to start therapy, and I was really scared when I started therapy. And I just kinda let that fill the space a little bit, um, and just her kind of, like, I don't know, feeling that support and connection in a way of like, "Oh, she's been in the same position that I have been in before." She really started to open up after that and felt comfortable sharing, and I think that just goes to show how I wouldn't say self-disclosure is always, like, the right approach, but I think in you know your client the best as a clinician, so I think it can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see that too in some of my work, especially with like teenagers and young adults who are coming for the first time of like, I know I need to be here, but I don't want to be here. So what are we
Mhm.
gonna do about it? And I've,
Yep.
like I think normalizing it too, that it's okay to be uncomfortable and feel weird about it.
Yeah,
It's a weird thing to
yep,
like sit
like
across from someone and talk about your feelings.
yeah, someone you never have met before, a stranger, and if you're not
Right.
used to opening up about your feelings with anyone, like, let alone a stranger, it's gonna feel weird, and just normalizing that. Like, it's
Hmm.
okay to feel uncomfortable or, like, hesitant about this experience. But it's coming from a place of, like, I see that, and I hear you, and we're gonna, like, work through those feelings together.
Yeah. How do you continue
Yeah.
to support your own mental health in this field as a therapist?
Yeah, that's been a work in progress for me.
Same.
Um, right when I started, um, like, my internship, because it was a year long, I had a really hard time compartmentalizing. I'd bring it home with me, I'd let it affect me, I would check my email at all hours of the day, um, and so it's really become, like, when I'll do progress notes later at night, but when my work schedule is done, I usually don't check my emails. Um, I've tried to set really healthy work boundaries with my life just because I know how much it can bleed into my life. And when I'm home, I want to be home. I want to be present with my husband and my friends and my family. And when I'm at work, I really try to be at work and as present as possible. Um, that is kind of why I'm going back into the office a little bit more, because I have worked from home this summer. And I think that's been a little challenging navigating. Like, my office is literally right there. I can just go work whenever I want to. But my own personal therapy, I will say, like, that's been a huge way that I take care of my mental health is talking to my therapist about like how to set those boundaries and how to maintain structure when you're really carrying a lot of weight. And weight sounds like a negative word, but a lot of people's stories. I think that can
Mhm.
be really hard sometimes to take care of yourself when you feel like you're taking care of a lot of other people too, which is a really important job. But I think I was neglecting myself for a lot in the beginning. So I try not to do that anymore.
Yeah, it's really hard to separate the two, especially knowing that you're going into a helping profession.
Hmm.
And as
Yeah.
like over, I say like overly, like we become therapists because we tend to be more empathetic, more compassionate
Hmm.
than just kind of maybe
Hmm.
an average person walking down the street, right? And
Hmm.
I went through a similar journey coming out of my internship and like adding on extra hours, or I would schedule that client in after my scheduled time because I felt guilty
Hmm.
or like I was letting them down.
Yep. Yep.
And that's been also for me too, just like a bigger piece of setting healthy boundaries and managing my own mental health.
Yep.
And now I think it gives
Well,
to a lot of extra insight into people who have difficulty setting boundaries.
hmm, yep.
Like I
I
get,
realized that was something I really needed to work on. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and as an empathetic person, I'm sure you feel the same way. But I went into this program and, I've never worked with clients before. Like, you kind of do your internship, that's when you start. And I had always been for lack of better terms, kind of fixer in a lot of people around his lives. And so I felt when I started taking on clients that it was kind of everywhere. Like I was fine doing it before and taking on a lot of that and being a lot of support for people around me. And I still do that, but I think I was doing it too much. And then when I took on clients too, I was like, holy crap, I don't have enough energy to even pour into my own cup, like let alone other people's. And so I think also having those supportive people around you who kind of recognize when you do need to step back and set those boundaries, that was huge for me because like I said, I'd always been like there for everyone at all times, at all hours of the night. And I was like, okay, I need time from me too. And that's something that, like you said, I feel guilty for, which I shouldn't, but as an empathetic, like caring human being who wants to help as many people as possible, like I was like, come on, like bring it all in. And it was affecting me a lot. So
I can't remember where I heard it, but like kind of the line of like asking people like, do you want me to help and try to fix, or do you want me to listen? Like
mhm,
that's been something I've really tried to use in my friendships and even at work with some of my clients. I'm like, do you really just want me to be that listening person right now? And then we can unpack it later? Or do you
mhm.
want my suggestions for making it better and fixing it right now? And
Yep.
I feel like that's kind of shifted my mental load around being a therapist too, of like, oh, it's okay if I just listen. Like
Yeah, you don't
some,
always need to
like,
be a fixer. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And sometimes people just want to vent and move on.
Mhm.
Amazing. Like, what a
You're
concept.
like, uh-huh. Yeah, like not like you don't always need to fix everyone. And I think,
Yeah.
when you become a therapist, you think that that's the goal. And I love, um, I Ryan has gone on my podcast. I run a podcast too, and I love what you said of like, I mean, it was focused on children. Like your child is not broken, but it's everyone who comes to therapy. Like you're not broken.
Mhm.
You might just need a little bit of support in your life, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. And so I think just like recognizing like there's nothing you need to fix about someone.
Yep.
There's goals that you're trying to reach. There's things that you're trying to like, you know, develop that are healthier, maybe coping mechanisms or ways that you move through the world. But yeah, kind of taking a step back if I don't need to fix everything has also been just a huge shift in my life. I think personally and professionally too.
Agreed. And I think we live in a society where it's very easy to feel broken
Yes. Yep.
and to think
Like if
that
you're not doing everything right.
yeah,
Yep. Yep.
something is wrong with you and you are broken.
Mhm.
Um, which is maybe a good segue into your work with suicide prevention and awareness, because
Yep.
it is
Yep.
Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. I think I said that backwards. Um, Regardless, the concept is the same. But I know this is
Regardless.
something that you are very passionate about.
Mhm. Yep.
Why?
Yeah, so um actually on this day 6 years ago I lost a friend to suicide. So
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I think that's my it's okay. I think that's my biggest why. And then a year later, one of my family members died to suicide. So I think that was around the same time I started going to therapy myself. And so I think all of that, like I said, was kind of it all played a role in why I'm a therapist today. And so that happened in 2017 and then 2018. And then I struggled for a lot of years. I was in therapy for a lot of years, kind of working through a lot of my feelings, like not only from that, but just like my childhood experiences. I feel like a lot of it built, I suppressed a lot of it. I was really struggling mentally. And so I was like, I want to create a community where people don't feel so alone because I had gone through years of mental health issues. I felt like I was kind of dealing with them alone. And I had realized like so many people around me too, when I would start to like be open about it, they were like, oh my God, me too. I just feel like you can't really talk about it. Like mental health is so stigmatized. So in 2021, I started a clothing company and I still kind of run it today. It's called Create Light. And the meaning behind the name was just like to create light out of the darkness because when you're in that dark place, you kind of feel like there's no light in it. So decided to start that and I've been selling clothing and the main focus is to just spread awareness to let people know they're not alone. And then 10% of all of those profits from clothing have gone to a different organization to support mental health every month. So my big focus, um, especially this month, all year around, like it's important all year round, but specifically this month is suicide prevention. So yeah, that's kind of my passion in life. So that's kind of what I try to work on with my clients too, is just creating a healthy, supportive environment for them and knowing that they're not alone. Yeah.
And Create Light's kind of evolved now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Into the
Yeah.
podcast. Anything else?
It's mainly the podcast,
Okay.
and working. I still do events, so I would
Oh,
say
right.
probably, up until 6 months ago, it was really focused on the clothing aspect of it. And another boundary I had to set with like work and life is I was doing all of that alone. So I was ordering the clothing, creating the clothing, selling the clothing, and it just got to be a lot. So I do still sell some clothing on my site, but about 6 months ago, I shifted to really focus on the podcast side of Create Light because my whole mission from the beginning is just to spread awareness, talk about mental health, make it less stigmatized, let people know that there's support out there. And so, what better way to do that than to talk about it? So, I talk about, my own personal journey, my healing and my growth, and I talk about, different mental health related topics. So, it's just something that I've really enjoyed a lot. I've had a lot of guests on. I've had Ryan on, which was incredible. So if you haven't listened to that, I would recommend listening to that. But yeah, I think it's just created more of a balance and a shift in my life because I just love talking about mental health. So what better way to do that than to start a podcast? And I still do suicide prevention, like events and fundraisers with the clothing side of it as well.
What has Create Light brought to you or given to you since you started it?
A sense of community. I think before I was in school surrounded by people who are on the same journey as you or who value mental health the same way that you do, I really didn't have that. So that created just such a huge, and it still does today, a huge sense of community for me in the mental health world. Because it's not only helped, I know other people, it's helped me. Like it's helped me be able to talk about things that I never thought I'd talk about before. It's allowed me to have more support with my own journey. And it's just this beautiful community where there's some like reciprocity in it, of just like growing and healing.
That's amazing. Where
Yeah.
do you see it going other directions in the future? Like, or is this kind of where it's at for now?
This is, I think, where it's at for now. I would love to be a part of even more events. I haven't really, I think the last event I did before this one coming up in October, which I'll talk a little bit about, was 2 years ago. I did a suicide prevention fundraiser at a golf tournament in my hometown, and that was amazing. We raised money, and over the past few years, we've raised thousands of dollars for mental health awareness, which is incredible. Yeah, and then in October 5th, in Bismarck, North Dakota, if you're around there, that area, I'll be working at a art gallery opening. So there's 5 different artists a part of that gallery who made designs to kind of support mental health awareness and different messages that will be sold, and then 100% of those proceeds will be donated to suicide prevention. So that is, I would say, just kind of where we're at. I am super passionate about different events, specifically for suicide prevention, but any mental health awareness. And then I really just love the podcast. I'd love to see the podcast continuing to grow, to have more like guests on it. And yeah,
What do you want people to know about suicide and suicide prevention and awareness?
I want people to know that depression is unfortunately more common than you think.
Yeah.
And I read this quote not too long ago that said, when you start to open up about your mental health, you realize that you're a part of a bigger club than you ever thought you would be. And it's really unfortunate, but it's also, it gives me some sort of peace to know that there's a lot of help out there. Um, and I encourage you, if you're struggling, just to reach out, seek that support. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And it mental health is still stigmatized, yes, but it is becoming less stigmatized. And a huge shift was last July, actually. The suicide prevention number changed from a whole number to a 988 number. So, like 911, it's 988. And that was a huge shift too, because, like I always talk about, mental health is just as important as physical health. When you're, physically in trouble, when you're in an accident, you call 911. When you're mentally in trouble, um, there used to really there never really used to be that number that you could just reach out to that was like always there, always a person on the other line. And now there is. So I think that just is showing such a positive shift in the mental health world, and knowing that there's always going to be someone. I'm always a resource. Everyone out we're here to support you. So I think that's just like, especially this month, I just want to preach that please reach out if you need anything. But yeah.
And I think just to add to that, asking about it and talking about it doesn't make it any more likely to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
I think that's a common misconception that we are going to put that idea in their head, or we are going to be the ones that make them follow through on it, when that's not
Mm-hmm.
the case. Um,
No.
and I
It's
feel like I
almost the
have,
opposite.
yeah, right? Like
Mhm,
you want to be acknowledged and validated in your feelings, and just know that
mhm.
someone cares. And I think
Yep,
one of the sweatshirts that I have from you is "The world is a better place with you in it," right?
mhm. Yep,
And how beautiful, like, that is beautiful, and more people need to hear that and know that.
yeah,
Um,
yep.
so I just think that's important, especially for us, like as people who work a great deal with children, and parents might be scared to
Mhm.
bring that topic up. Like,
Yep,
it is okay. Your child really
yep,
does want you to take an interest and to ask how they're
mhm.
doing.
Yep. Because it's
And
opening the floor to have that bigger conversation. I
yeah,
think when you don't talk about it because you think it's gonna, like we mentioned, with, like, trigger something, it's almost like silencing that person in a way. And there's shame that comes with it of, okay, if I can't talk about it with my closest friends or family, who can I talk about it with? Yeah.
hey, let's see. You mentioned you're doing well. So you and I have a yoga workshop coming up. It's kind of an abrupt
Yes.
segue. Well, we can fix
No.
that. We can do
That's
that.
okay.
um, so, um, okay. So shifting from the topic of suicide awareness and prevention, like Sydney mentioned, her and I have known each other. It's been a couple years now, because I graduated
Yeah,
a while ago, and you graduated this, yeah. So it's been
been
a
probably
little
2
while.
years.
Um,
Yeah.
and we've really started to come together and do some work together, for the greater community, and really working to reduce the stigma around mental health and bring some more resources out into the community. So we have a yoga workshop coming up that we are doing with children, at the end of this
Mhm.
month, which is September 30th. And then you are doing the event in North Dakota. Did you say October 5th?
Yes, October 5th. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And so just some great resources, and we can link some resources too to this podcast. But Sydney, where can the people find you?
Yeah, so my handle on Instagram has changed to Create Light Podcast. So you can find me there, find me at createlight.org. And then I'm also on Facebook. I'm not as active on Facebook. I mostly just keep that for my grandma. But I still post everything up there. I'm just not as interactive, I would say, on Instagram. So if you ever have any questions or want to reach out to me, my email and my phone number are on my Instagram, and you can also DM me.
And you provide therapy services in Minnesota.
Yes. Yep. In Minnesota, I am at Resiliency and Health Institute in Golden Valley. So you can find me there. You can find me on Psychology Today. But yeah, work with a lot of different age ranges, and yeah, I love the work that I do. And it's just really powerful and impactful to like sit with a person in the therapeutic space while they do empower themselves to like make a change. And so that's just really awesome to sit with a person through that.
Yeah. So we'll just wrap up with just a few minutes left. Do you have a great piece of advice that you want to share, or any final thoughts to our conversation today? All right. So we have just a few minutes left.
Okay.
I have a final question for you. If you could start a movement that would bring the most amount of good to the most amount of people, what would that be?
What have people said in the past?
I know it's open for interpretation. My answer historically has been having a greater societal shift toward validating, acknowledging, and learning about mental health. I don't think we will
Mm,
ever fully reduce the stigma. I don't think mental health will ever reach the level that like medical health care is. But I
yeah.
think if I could make a change and start a movement, it would just
Hmm.
be to see that shift, that like it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. No, and I feel like that's a really good question. I feel like going back to what I had said before about like I believe physical health is just as important as mental health. And I think just creating a space where people's perceptions of mental health is the same as how they view physical health. And I've said this before in podcasts and blog posts, like when people break an arm, a lot of condolences of like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. What can I do? A lot of sympathy. Whereas, you try to die by suicide or you say you're depressed and people kind of walk the other way.
Yeah.
So, and not always, but I think as a society as a whole, we really have a hard time knowing how to approach or help people that are struggling with mental health. And so creating just a space and more of just a community where that's as supported as physical health is.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's important. It shouldn't be frowned upon. But I think part of it is
Yeah.
that it's scary.
Yeah.
Like a broken
Yeah.
bone is easily fixed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. And I think that's just, unfortunately, it takes time. Um, with everything, like therapy takes time. People's perceptions of mental health, it takes time. Um, Fortunately, when I started therapy, so like mainly because I had a lot of support from my family. And I know that's not always the case, but a lot of my family members have been in therapy and they saw me struggling. And I remember my dad was like, you should see someone, and not in a way of judgment, not in a way of shame, just you should go see someone. And I wish that everyone thought about it that same way. But I do have hope because we are staying, and a lot of people are entering the mental health field as, you know, people just wanting to help other people. And Even the shift, it seems small, but from a huge number that you can't remember to a small 3-digit number, those are small shifts that are happening over time. And it's just really awesome to see that change.
Yeah. Our progress is going to be little but mighty.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can't change the world, but even if you can change a few people's worlds, I think that's
Yeah.
that's enough for me.
Yeah. I agree. Well, this has
Mhm.
been such a delightful conversation.
Yeah,
I'm
always
so
is with
glad.
you.
I know. I feel like it just works and we just like
Mhm.
practice like Sydney and I practice very similarly and have
Yeah.
professionally similar interests and approaches. And so our conversations generally can take a nice flow, which is
Yes. Yep.
really cool. And so I want to thank you again for joining me today and on the middle of in the middle of your day, your Monday. Um,
I really appreciate you having me.
and yeah, great. Well, I will let you get back to your day and
Okay,
we're
thank
just